Today's program is for everyone who finds them spending way too much time on their cell phone or their computer. We're going to talk about how we can become more intentional in our lives. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter, and I'm so glad that you could join us today. Doug Smith is my guest today, and he is a software developer. He's also a husband and a wonderful father of 4 beautiful girls, and he's going to talk to us about how we can become more intentional in our lives. Doug, it's good to meet you today.
Thank you so much, Monica. It's an honor to be here with you.
So it's interesting, when I met you, your background of being a software developer, so kind of being this techie person doing all that kinds of work, and yet you've really come to the knowledge of that some of the techie people, without us knowing it, are really trying to make us spend more times on our phones, on screens, on computers. And I think we see that when we're at a restaurant, everybody looking at their phones.
Yes.
Tell me about how you came to this conclusion and what made you write the book.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, like all of us, I've grown up with our technology really encroaching upon us more subtly, I think, than we realize, because now it feels like it's everywhere, but it hasn't always been that
Right.
way. But you look back 10, 20 years, you see, wow, things have really increased. And now there's billions of devices everywhere. And as you said, I'm a developer, and so I love technology. And yet I started noticing, even in feeling in myself, this compulsion, like, I've got to check it first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and all kinds of different things playing on it. And I started wondering what is going on. And I did start doing some research. And when I learned what the industry was doing intentionally to make technology habit-forming, addictive, compulsive, I felt compelled to write about it.
Yeah, because, I think I can certainly relate to what you're saying. I feel like I need to look at my phone to check email, and I need to do that right before I go to bed. And as soon as I wake up, like to see if anything happened that I need to deal with.
Yep.
And I sort of looked at it as a way of just being responsible and keeping ahead of things. And yet I noticed that causes me to feel anxious and compelled. Like it has a lot of negative reactions. And so for me to hear you say as a software developer that actually people have thought about this and tried to make me want to do that even more makes me think, oh, what is that?
Right. And that is the thing that really drove me to want to talk about it, because most people don't realize, just like you're saying, they feel like this is what they want to do. And yet some of the best and brightest minds have spent billions of dollars and millions of hours, top researchers from around the country pouring in their knowledge to really exploit weaknesses in our behavioral psychology.
Yeah.
In order to be just incredibly intentional about every nuance of the design of apps and devices, so that we end up wanting to all the time.
Yeah. So is their end game like to make more money so that we buy more devices and more electronics and more things? So they want money.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they figure out what human nature wants. Like
That's right.
to look at screens, to do this, just that fulfillment that you get. Like you never see anybody wait alone at an airport anymore without a phone.
Right. No, and that's exactly right. The business model of most of, especially social media, it's a free app, right? But if it's free, you're the product. So we are what is being sold, our data, our preferences, and then our preferences, of course, are being shaped by them so that we want what they want us to want. And so that cycle then is extremely profitable. All of those big name companies that we're all familiar with are the top companies on the market today because they're so good at what they do, getting us very profitably to do what they want us to do.
And so here we are doing all of that and looking at our phones and computer screens, like every waking hour, just feeling like I have to do it.
Yes.
I've even laughed with friends and said, you kind of feel like you get a twitch. You got to pick up that phone and look at that. So Doug, you wrote this book called Unintentional, and it's how screens secretly shape your desires, but more importantly, and how you can break free.
Exactly.
Because I almost feel like I'm stuck.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerless feeling. You just feel like, what can I do? I'm on this hamster wheel
Yes.
and I can't get off. What do I do? And so, but there is a way to freedom.
So I would like us to talk about that, because I think that even when I think about being stuck, and perhaps some of you that are watching today and feel like you're stuck, we feel like we're doing it to stay in touch with our family and friends. We're doing it to keep up with work, because, you know, years ago, the expectation was not that we worked 24/7
That's right.
and went home and worked some more and worked on the weekend, but that seems to be the expectation now. So we've got all of that going on. So I really want us to talk about how to break free. What are some ways, and how can we know if we're in trouble?
Those are wonderful questions. The first thing that I always want to tell people about on their path to freedom is that we have to develop an awareness. There's just this awakening that happens. Oh, I didn't know this was intentional. And then you learn about the strategies involved so that you are able to start being able to defend yourself and realize what's going to happen. So that's the first thing I always ask people to do. From there, you know, nobody sets out trying to, with a goal in life, to spend the equivalent of a full-time job on their devices, right? They're not.
Absolutely not.
And yet we're doing it 6+ hours a day, non-work time. Kids too, of course.
So 6+ hours a day
Yes.
of
yes.
non-work time?
That's right.
You know, when I hear you say that, I resemble that remark. Yeah.
Right. And
yeah, that happens.
that's the average. So a lot of people are way more than that.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so again, they didn't do that on purpose. They
No.
didn't, when I grow up, I want to provide data to the biggest companies in the world for free for all of the rest of my waking hours.
Right.
None of us did that.
No.
So, but having that awareness, I think that's the first step to freedom. From there, it's a matter, what I go through in the book is guiding people through first casting a vision for what their life could be like. What are they missing out on? Because they're spending all this time. Maybe they've always wanted to do something. Maybe they've always wanted to serve in certain ways. And they always feel like, I don't have time. I wish I could do this. I don't. So if they could cast a vision for what would my life be like if I wasn't caught up in that, then they can begin to build motivation towards breaking free.
Yeah. Maybe just to dream a little bit about how
Exactly.
great that life could be. I know that I found myself, and I'm sorry to say, like even at restaurants with my husband, I'll grab the phone just to catch up, like
Sure.
what's going on. And then I look around and everybody else is doing that too. And I think, well, some years ago, maybe that would have just been a nice conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, people and our relationships are far more important than technology. So you're saying that first step is the awareness of, gosh, this is a problem.
That's right.
And that people are doing this on purpose to make money.
Yep.
And we didn't realize it. We didn't sign up for it. Like I remember when I got my first cell phone thinking, this is great. If I have an emergency, I can call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that doesn't happen too much, really.
No.
It's just the way to talk and communicate and all that now.
Right. And constantly.
Yeah.
So we're always in emergency mode, aren't we? Yeah, that's how it feels like anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that expectation of instant communication also helps create that sense of urgency.
Right.
And so then we keep responding to all this urgent stuff. And I've got to think that the result on us emotionally and in our relationships is much more negative than what we think.
It is. And you can actually track, starting from the release of the iPhone in around 2007, the statistics on everything you mentioned, anxiety, depression, even suicidality. You know, I mean, people are getting depressed, especially the young people. It's not an upgrade, I say often. It's not a thing. This is not helping us. We are trying to keep up and we never can. The devices and the apps are designed to never be done. Like you never get to the bottom of your Facebook feed.
No, you
never
don't.
You never get done with news. It's never ending. So you can never win, you can never succeed, you can never get, there's always something more. And again, that is by design.
Yeah. And so when I hear you say that about younger people, then my heart really hurts especially.
Sure.
Because I think that all of these people at younger and younger ages are getting smartphones.
Yes.
And they love it because they think that it's great. But what is that like for them in their life spiritually and relationally?
Yeah, it's almost all negative, unfortunately, and yet it is the culture we live in. It is the norm. It's the expectation that, you know, maybe middle school, maybe, you know, even then people feel like that's waiting a long time. But it's unfortunately the data shows that it's hurting them in almost every way, relationally, educationally, psychologically, physically. You know, because if you're a common pattern is a child comes home from school, they get a snack. they grab their phone, they spend the rest of the time in their room on their phone. This is not a good thing in any of those areas of life.
No.
And it's really a tragedy that but we're all going along with it because everyone else is doing it.
Right. And because even, like I was saying, I just felt trapped. I just came to this place that, like, this is how modern day life is.
Sure.
And then when I met you and I learned about the book Unintentional and about that there really is a plan behind all of this, which I had never thought about before. And I took your assessment, Doug. So Doug has this assessment, and that's available to you. But when I took the assessment, like, I failed miserably.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, so I'm in crisis with this technology, with these screens. And yes, I have to do part of that for work, but I do not have to go overboard.
Right.
But I want you, if you could, I know you can't download the whole book for us
Sure.
right this second, but what are some ways that just average people that live in the real world, that go to school, that work, how can we not be a part of the crisis?
Right. Oh, that's so good, Monica. Well, first of all, the assessment is at howimi.com. So if anybody wants to do that, it's a free download to 20 questions that lead you through how I being intentional. Because who we are as a person is really at stake when we're not able to think for ourselves,
Right.
and when we're constantly in crisis mode. We're not being the I we're made to be. So what can people do? Well, I'm a Christian, and my book is a very Christian book. So I lay out what's a very Christ-focused set of solutions, Christ-focused set of really a way of life, a way of living in freedom. And it all starts with that, for me, this is what's worked for me, with complete surrender to Christ. And that's the foundation for all the rest. Because what that does, starting from a place of, Lord, you're in charge and I'm not, we can start asking questions about what else is in charge of my life. Because what that does, and what I often say, is that sometimes when you hear these conversations, people say, I just need to be balanced with my phone.
Right.
I just need balanced with my technology. Just be balanced, except each of us are probably the most balanced person we know. I'm balanced, right? I do everything in moderation. Unfortunately, most of us aren't. And so when we start looking at it instead and going, Lord, what's good for me? What do you want from me? You start from that standpoint, then everything else starts to fall into place. And the rest of the book really lays out that path from there to finding that path to freedom.
That's such a good starting point. We've got to take a break. I want you to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to take more a look at the book Unintentional, written by Doug Smith, so that we can live in the freedom that God has designed for each of us. We'll be right back.
Don't miss another episode of Bridges. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today, where you can find all of Monica's latest teachings and interviews. It's easy to do. Just visit youtube.com, search Monica Schmelter, and click subscribe. Once you are subscribed, click the bell icon to get notified when a new episode is available to view. Thanks for watching Bridges.
For more information on a guest, visit our website, ctntv.org.
If you're just joining us today on Bridges, my guest is Doug Smith. He has written a book called Unintentional, and it's all about how screens on our devices really secretly shape our desires, and how we can break free from just being addicted and compelled to be looking at our phone and on the computer and electronics all of the time. And so, Doug, you really wrote this from the heart of a Christian, a husband, a father, and also somebody that's a software developer, and you love technology.
Yes.
And so I was pleased as I read your book that there really is a way to break free.
Yes.
And you're saying the first part of that is to completely surrender to Christ, and not be telling ourselves the stories that we say, like, I just need to be balanced, everything in moderation, because that might not really be being completely surrendered to Christ. So tell me, for you, what that looked like a little bit. How did you go from being really attached to those screens to getting free?
Thank you. Yeah, that was the thing that God had to work with me on, was to help me understand that how much I was missing. And really felt this sense that if I didn't find a way through the things that were tripping me up, that that I would be missing the call that God had for me. And I think this book is part of that.
Yeah.
So I felt that sense, that really kind of a heavy weight to it. So when I realized, okay, this is happening, I said, I did begin this process of surrender, and it's a daily thing for me.
Yes,
It's not
yes.
a one and done. It's okay, now today he might reveal something else. And so it was like, okay, I just can't have cable for right now. I can't, that's taking me off track, or I can't have this smartphone in my room at this time because I'm compelled to grab it, because I'm watching that. So I had to, as he would reveal these things to me, or I need this accountability even, I need someone that I can talk to who's asking me, Doug, how you doing? Those kind of things. So I had to invite those kind of things into my life in order to get me on a path to eventually overcoming what had become habitual, but is no longer by the grace of God.
Right. And sometimes when we talk about addictions and habits, we think about things that are illegal, things that could send us to jail or to prison. And so this kind of a compulsion or addiction, well, I guess if you're driving and texting that, but that's a serious problem and illegal. But for most people, it's missing out on relationships.
That's right.
It's being at a restaurant and checking the phone, or instead of really listening to our children, checking the phone, allowing our kids to really get deep into too much technology that's far too much for their ages. Now, you have 4 daughters. Did you put boundaries down for them, or?
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so. We, in fact, some of them would tell you we probably had too many boundaries. So if you would ask them, but we were far from perfect, but we definitely had a very different countercultural approach to technology, even among those times. Now our youngest is about to turn 23, so we weren't quite as involved in smartphones. Were just coming out toward the tail end of her, but we didn't do smartphones with them. We were not early adopters as much as I love technology. We just didn't. So we were very, I would say again, countercultural, intentional about what we did. Like no screens in bedrooms, like that was a thing. Like no, we are not doing that. We also had one computer in a centrally located with filters and all the rest. But the biggest thing that I think we did, because we often talk in these conversations about we don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. But that never works unless you have a better yes, or something you're going towards. And so our family was very proactive about doing things together, daily practices of reading and praying together. And then we did things like community theater, we did things like mission trips and those kind of things too. So all things that our family was involved with intentionally to form a culture, again, a counterculture that wasn't just led by every new thing that came along.
Right. And I just think how wonderful that you got more family time and that you all were able to do everything. And I think of that scripture in the book of Romans. It tells us, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And that is countercultural. That is not believing everything that the world sets as our standard and like, well, cell phones are here and computers are here and electronics are here, so we just need to do this. Since you're in the industry, did people think that that was odd if they knew?
They did, yeah. We were unusual. You don't do that. You don't have the latest whatever. You still have a flip phone. Or, it's those kind of things. Because we were late adopters, and so yeah, absolutely, people make fun of us. But I would just smile and be, yes, we're different, but on purpose.
And you were at peace, and you're fulfilling God's plan, and so. I love that you said it's not just a list of rules about what we can't do, but like we're giving up all of this so we can get in on all of this good stuff that God has for us, and that our family needs to go in a different direction so that we can have more family time. And I would just imagine that would have to, for the most part, yield in fewer problems with the kids.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, when you look at what kids need, most of all, they need that close family. They need, above all else, and yet the thing that the screens seem to attack is that family time. And it's going right to the heart of what they really, really need, that time with mom and dad. Now, honestly, that's hard. That's hard for us as parents. Like it's kind of nice if the kid's off doing something on a screen because then we can go do what we want. But then, as you mentioned, that builds up this addiction. And intentionally forming true addiction. All the same mechanisms that substance abuse has are at play on our devices. And so we don't want that for our kids. We have to do the hard work as parents to make that happen.
And relationships, they take time.
Yes.
And they take being intentional.
Yes.
And really devices, they take time, but they don't take being intentional. Like
That's right.
they just invade us. And that's just kind of like this norm. And it's kind of for some people maybe like bragging, like I've got the best phone, I've got the best stuff, I've got this, I've got that. So there's even that level of peer pressure and
Oh, yes.
competition. And we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars for the devices plus monthly fees. And so God really put it on your heart to write this book. And the book, again, is Unintentional, and it's written by Doug Smith. And it's all about how screens secretly shape our desires, and more importantly, how can we break free? So maybe you could give us a couple of tips. I know we said it starts with surrender to Christ, but what are some practical things that like every individual or every family could at least try?
Sure.
You know, as they're watching this and thinking, you know, I'm in trouble here, but what can I try to see if I can get out of this habit?
Sure. The thing to try would be to begin. So the second thing actually just goes right into that, which is to ask the Lord, what should I be removing? What would you say needs to not have a role in my life, even for a period, even for a season? There's an author named Dr. Joshua Straub. He says, whatever you cannot fast from owns you. So that's a thing. So can you take a break, maybe for a season? Many authors actually recommend this. Maybe you take off a week, maybe you take off 30 days. And we're on a media fast, family. We're going to evaluate where we're at. We're going to say, Lord, what can we then bring back into our lives after this period of 30 days? Now, I don't advocate becoming Amish or something like that. And not having any technology. I am still a developer to pay the bills and all that. So, I mean, there is a role for technology, but for some people, they may not be able to have a smartphone at all because it's too tempting, takes them off track. Other people may say, well, actually, now I realize my issues, and I can have with these boundaries around my phone, I can have it. Same with other screens, with tablets and whatever, all those kinds of things, whatever technology.
Yeah. And that's like with anything. You know, we all are different. We're all wired differently. And for some people with proper accountability and having an intentional plan that says, you know, from this time to this time, I'm not going to be on the phone. And I think, you know, even though some people might think it's unthinkable to not have a smartphone, the thing is, if it's destroying your family
Right.
and that it owns you, I think of that scripture that says, what benefit would it be to gain the whole world and destroy or lose your soul? What would the benefit be just to hold this really cool device in your hand? And you know, what it teaches us is instant gratification, that we can find information anytime, you know, and the phone does in some ways talk back, but like it's not like a real person where you really have to relate to them.
That's right. Yeah, and so you're right. It's a lower barrier to entry than face-to-face communication. It is more difficult to work, but it's so much more valuable, and those relationships are and so vital. If you get to, like you said, you get to the end of your life, and you had invested all this time online, and you lost your marriage or you lost your kids, you know, because you had to be caught up on this or that. That would be a bad trade.
Absolutely. And as you said, no one would do that on purpose.
Right.
No one would sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to give my kids way too much freedom with devices and screens. I'm going to ruin my marriage and not be able to make conversation anymore. It just wouldn't even make logical sense for somebody to say that. And yet, it just happens like really gradually and as a part of the culture. Now understand, Doug, and again, the book is Unintentional. It's written by Doug Smith, and it's all about how screens secretly shape our desires and how we can break free. You have really, from readers and from people that have heard your message, you have received feedback and reports of people who say, man, my life is better. Could you highlight some of that?
Absolutely, and that's the best thing about writing. This is my first book, so this is a fantastic, you pray about it, you know, you write this book and you go, I hope this helps somebody. You start hearing someone say, one of my friends who was an early reader and he says, you know, I'm able to write my novel now because I've cut out some of these things, and he's got an amazing story to tell. I've had people say, I did not realize what the effect this was having on my marriage, and my marriage is better. I've had people, the best things of all, I've had people say my relationship with God is closer. I've never been this close to God because I feel closer to Him. I can hear Him now. like I haven't been able to before because of all the noise.
Right.
So those kind of reports I've had from readers already, and it's just, I can't tell you there's nothing better than that.
Because when we fill up every moment of our day with something,
Yes.
and there's so much noise, it would be harder to hear God's still small voice.
That's right, absolutely.
And to make time for His Word and for all of those things that help us grow.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming and for joining me today. It's been so good.
Oh, thank you, Monica. It's an honor to be here. I sure appreciate the
It's
time.
been so good to talk to you. The book's name again is Unintentional, and it's written by Doug Smith, and we will have all of that information up on the website. I'll be back in just a moment with closing comments. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter. I'm glad that you could join us today.
All of these different people united on the same team, praying for each other, blessing each other.
And it was that hope and that faith is why I survived.
When my dad was preaching for a youth revival, and I don't know what happened, still I can't believe it. I was the first person who stood up and walked down the aisle.
He gave me my first Bible, and he opened a window in my life to Christian faith through Jesus Christ.
When you want the Lord to speak to you, it's like you don't know what He's going to tell you.
If we'll be just that one that could step up in faith to say, God, I just trust that you have better than this.
No one else can tell you what you need except God, because He loves us. We're His children.
Do you have a ministry or business? You can contact Nashville's WHTN for studio and programming rates. Visit ctntv.org/studio or call 615-754-0039 for more details.
Today on Bridges, we've really focused on being intentional about your life and really seeking God and seeking His plan, and not being so willing to fill up every moment of every day with all of the various devices and the demands that those devices bring into our lives. And author Doug Smith really challenged us today to start that process with complete surrender to Christ. And I know that I personally am making that decision to surrender all of my time on the devices, on the computers, to the Lord, and to ask Him, how much is too much, and what do I need to do in my life so that I can be closer to God, be closer with my family, and closer with my friends. And you know, as hard as it seems to cut down on all of that technology, there's so much to gain by making that commitment. There's so much to gain by being closer to God, by being closer with our family, and building those quality relationships. The body of Christ is all about being in community. It's about us growing in our faith. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with technology or with cell phones. But when they take over our life, and when we can't go out to dinner with our family without checking the cell phone constantly, something's wrong. So maybe today is the day that we all make that choice to really make more time for life and for God. We're out of time, we say goodbye, and God bless you.